A special thank you to each of our subscribers who make this channel possible. Here's today's story. In a bold announcement, former U.S. President Donald Trump declared that Israel has accepted the necessary conditions to finalize a significant 60-day ceasefire agreement in Gaza. This statement, made on his social media platform Truth Social, suggests that this deal could represent a final opportunity for peace in a region that has been marred by violence and conflict for far too long. Trump also issued a stern warning to Hamas, indicating that the terms of the ceasefire would not improve should they choose to reject the proposal. The United States, according to Trump, plans to utilize this two-month window to collaborate with all involved parties, including regional powers and international mediators, to work towards a resolution to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. The proposed ceasefire is expected to include a phased plan that involves the release of Israeli hostages as well as potential releases of Palestinian detainees held in Israeli prisons. Key players in this negotiation process, Qatar and Egypt, are anticipated to convey the final terms of the agreement to Hamas leadership for review. However, despite Trump's optimistic announcement, Israeli officials have yet to provide formal confirmation of their agreement to the ceasefire conditions. Furthermore, Hamas has remained silent regarding the proposal, leading to uncertainty about whether the agreement will advance or stall once more. In the coming week, Trump is set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington, where he has indicated he will advocate strongly for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Trump expressed confidence that Netanyahu is genuinely committed to ending the hostilities in Gaza, suggesting that a ceasefire deal could potentially be reached during or shortly after their discussions. In parallel diplomatic developments, Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, is currently in Washington, engaging with key U.S. officials including Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Vice President J.D. Vance to further the negotiation process and align strategies between the two countries. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, stated that Israel is fully prepared to enter a ceasefire agreement, but he emphasized that Hamas has been resistant to negotiation efforts and that time is running out. Danon reiterated that if Hamas does not return to the negotiating table, Israel would be compelled to increase military pressure to secure the release of hostages held in Gaza. Israeli officials maintain that any permanent resolution must involve dismantling Hamas military capabilities and ensuring the safe return of all Israeli hostages. Reports indicate that approximately 50 hostages are still being held in Gaza, with intelligence suggesting that at least 20 of them are alive. Danon underscored that for Israel, the war cannot conclude until every hostage is brought home, which remains a central tenet of Israel's negotiation strategy and public communication. While Hamas has yet to publicly respond to the new ceasefire proposal, senior officials within the organization previously indicated that mediators from Egypt and Qatar were intensifying their efforts to find a solution. Nevertheless, negotiations with Israel have been stalled due to fundamental disagreements, with Hamas continuing to demand a permanent truce, the full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, and guarantees of Palestinian sovereignty over the territory, demands that Israel has consistently rejected. The existing gap between the two sides has hindered numerous attempts at reaching a longer-term agreement, including the most recent ceasefire deal that collapsed earlier this year after only a few days. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to deteriorate. Recent reports indicate that at least 20 Palestinian civilians were killed in an Israeli airstrike that targeted a popular seafront cafe in Gaza City. This tragic incident occurred during the evening hours when civilians had gathered to escape the summer heat. Medical personnel and eyewitnesses confirmed the casualties, which included several women and children. This airstrike is one of many in a recent escalation that follows renewed Israeli orders for evacuations in parts of northern Gaza. Israeli defense officials have justified these measures by claiming they are based on intelligence suggesting that Hamas is planning new attacks and continuing to smuggle weapons into densely populated civilian areas. Since the surprise attack by Hamas on southern Israel on October 7, 2023, which resulted in the deaths of approximately 1,200 people and numerous hostages, Israel has launched an intensive military campaign across the Gaza Strip. According to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza, more than 56,600 Palestinians have been killed as a result of Israeli airstrikes and ground assaults, a figure that includes thousands of children and elderly individuals. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has drawn significant international scrutiny. This week, Israel acknowledged that it is investigating reports that civilians may have been injured or killed while attempting to access food and supplies at aid distribution centers operated by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GCHF. The GCHF, which is backed by both the U.S. and Israeli governments, was established to circumvent what they describe as Hamas interference in humanitarian logistics. However, over 170 NGOs and aid organizations, including Oxfam and Save the Children, have called for the GCHF to be shut down, arguing that Israeli forces routinely open fire on Palestinians simply trying to collect basic necessities. Israel denies these allegations, asserting that the GCHF is essential to ensure aid reaches those in need without being diverted by Hamas operatives. This latest ceasefire proposal follows the breakdown of a previous agreement earlier this year, which was intended to unfold in 3 stages. The first phase involved a temporary pause in hostilities and the partial exchange of hostages, while the second phase aimed to establish a permanent ceasefire and facilitate the return of remaining hostages. The third phase was expected to initiate broader political discussions about Gaza's future governance. Unfortunately, the ceasefire did not progress beyond the initial phase, as Israel resumed airstrikes in March, describing them as preemptive actions based on intelligence that Hamas was preparing for renewed attacks. This return to violence effectively dismantled the agreement, with no new ceasefire reached until now. Although Trump's announcement signals a potential turning point, the situation on the ground remains volatile, with civilian casualties continuing to increase and diplomatic positions remaining entrenched. Both sides accuse each other of bad faith, and the next few days will be crucial. Netanyahu's upcoming visit to Washington and Hamas's response to the final proposal delivered by Qatari and Egyptian mediators will determine whether the region moves towards a temporary calm or plunges deeper into prolonged warfare. Until a formal agreement is confirmed and implemented, the future of Gaza, and the thousands of lives still at risk, remains uncertain. That's all for this story. We upload videos every day covering many different subjects, so hit that subscribe button to stay informed. Thanks for watching.